Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Report Desk Africa. This is where we bring you developing stories, especially from the reporter's perspective as we cover them. Now, turning to our next story, the tragic incident occurred recently in Ajah, Lagos, where a two-story building under construction collapsed, resulting in fatalities and injuries. Now, building collapses have sadly become a distressingly common occurrence in Nigeria, raising concerns about construction quality and the nation's maintenance culture. Now, factors like substandard materials, non-adherence to building codes, and inadequate oversight contribute to these tragedies. Now, my colleague here, Bernard Akede, did visit the site of the collapsed building and put together this report. So let's take a listen.
What was once an almost completed two-story building now lies in ruins. The devastating collapse marks Lagos' first building failure of 2025, raising fresh concerns about construction standards and safety materials in the state. News of the collapse began to circulate on social media late Tuesday evening, though the exact location remained uncertain at first. Upon arrival, News Central's crew confirmed that the incident occurred at the Mega Mound Estate in Lekki County Homes near Ajah. Eyewitnesses say an excavator and other heavy machinery had already been deployed by the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, LASEMA, which carried out rescue operations. Officials confirmed that 7 people were pulled from the debris, 5 survived, while 2 were found dead. However, residents fear that more victims may still be trapped beneath the rubble. Concerns have also been raised over the quality of construction materials used, with some eyewitnesses blaming substandard workmanship for the collapse. Despite efforts to gather more details, our crew was asked to leave the site before we could conduct further interviews. One critical question lingers. If the collapse happened around 2 p.m., why did news of it only surface online about 6 hours later? Could there have been an attempt at damage control? Whatever the case, this incident once again highlights the urgent need for stricter building regulations and enforcement in Lagos to prevent further tragedies. In Lagos for News Central, I'm Bernard Akede.
This is a very sad development, and honestly, a lot of things are really meeting me by surprise, and I'm sure we'll get to dissect them as we go. Now, there's no need for long talk, Bernard. You were there, you covered it. Sadly, this is the first building collapse. You mentioned it's a first, but not a good first. Yeah. It's a first building collapse in Lagos this year. But let's not pretend like it's been a long time since we experienced building collapse, because in 2024 alone, there was about 47 building collapses across the country, and Lagos was leading with about 15 different cases. Buildings were collapsing like water. One of our correspondents thankfully did not, but almost got caught in that as well. So I'm going to start off by asking, because like I said, a lot of things baffle me, especially with this particular development, looking at precedents, the fact that, you know, other building collapses would have seen it over the internet, would have seen the stories about it, but we will get to that. I want to start off by asking, we hear that it was a bit challenging to locate the site of the collapse. True. Why was that?
I honestly don't understand it. And it's the first time. You mentioned about 15 building collapses last year. I think I covered 4 or at least 5 of them. And of all those 5, 4 of them had fatalities, sadly. And it was very easy. Once it happens, you have people share information across social media. And then we have journalist groups, you know, where we can go to. I only saw this at about 8 p.m. I just got home, you know, after work, and I saw building collapse. And the first thing that came to my head was, oh, wow, here's my story for tomorrow. And then looking back, I saw that, wait, it looks like this has happened since 2 p.m. We're well at the office as at then. You know, so it began to baffle me, like, how come we're just seeing this about 6 hours later? And even at that, what was even more baffling was the exact location of the building collapse was not specific, right? While some reports had it that it was Chevron Drive, Ajah. First of all, Chevron Drive is not in Ajah. You know, another one was saying Mega Mound Estate. Another report was, I saw one that said Vulture Estate, and I'm like, okay, I've never seen an estate called Vulture Estate before. So it was almost like information wasn't accurate, wasn't correct, which made it even more difficult to locate the place the next morning. And I also got to find out that not many, as a matter of fact, I think we were maybe the only journalists who were able to make it there on ground to see what happened. And even making it there was quite difficult, because not until almost 7:30 a.m. was I able to eventually get the exact location of the place. So again, looking at the time when the building actually collapsed and when it was, when it began to get reported in papers and the exact location, it almost seemed like it was a deliberate act, not a damage control, basically, not to get the full information out there.
Okay, so, we are not trying to make speculations and all, but looking at the past occurrences, right? I was trying to dig up what the federal ministries or federal governments have been saying about building collapses. Again, let's remind you that this is not in any way a one in 10 case or 1 in 20. It's a constant occurrence, right? And I remember, November 11th, that's the one I could find. That was just a few months ago. The Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development decried the impact and listed put out a list of things that they were going to do to address this. And I'm sure that primary of those, would I say, responsibilities will be surveying these buildings, will be inspecting, having agents on ground and all that. Have we heard any steps that have been taken towards that effect in terms of the newly constructed buildings? Because this is very similar to demolitions of buildings.
True.
They come out and say, oh, they've issued a warning, everybody pack out. And I'm like, that is not the problem. The problem is who allowed these things in the first place. Yeah. There was definitely somebody who was collecting some little things to keep mum. But at the end of the day, we see that there is a continuous repetition of these things. How is it that you sanction it, but like 3, 4, 5 more come up? So is it that we are not, there's still a process that is being clouded by, I don't know how to put it, but have we heard of any actual measures that have been put in place since all of this building collapses? Yeah,
well, I think the one in November, maybe it was that one that I actually covered, which was the last one I covered somewhere in Lagos, I can't remember now. There were no fatalities in that particular one I covered. And then, from there you could see the appropriate agencies marking certain buildings that they felt were not habitable for people to stay in, or that they felt while the buildings were still under construction, the structures they saw were not solid enough. No. But it appears that they can only do this where the buildings are in places that they can easily access. This place I went to now is an estate. It's a big estate, right? You go in there, you won't even understand. Like my colleague, the camera operator, was saying, it looks like a hideout. Very cool, very cozy, quiet place. So before the authorities can even get in there, they may not even know that there are certain constructions, going in there. So they will need to gain access first of all, to get in there. It's like you said, there probably are regulations, right? But how strict are these regulations being followed? How strictly are they being adhered to? And then again, there's also the issue of, who owns the structure. You can have structures that are owned by certain people who are, top shots, right? Seemingly untouchable persons, right? And then it's difficult for the strong arm of the law to get to them. I'm not saying that's the case here, but it is a problem on its own, And then there's also the problem of the owner of the building contracting it out to a certain contractor, just like what we had yesterday, and the contractor not using the right materials. I'm not a building engineer, but you could hear whispers from the people around, complaining about substandard materials, which is something we've heard time and time again. Saying, oh, you should have used 16 mm metal rods, they used 10 mm metal rods, things like that, saying that the concrete that they see on the floor or on the ground after the building came down is not as solid as they would have expected it to be. And these are things I heard over and over again last year when different buildings came down. So coming back to what you said again, we actually do need the authorities to be more heavy-handed when it comes to construction of buildings so that we can avoid such tragedies. There's no price you can put on human life, regardless of how many people or the kinds of people who pass away, especially when it comes to things that could have been easily avoided.
I know most times they say that the truth is usually in the gossip, but I think my question would be, was there any official primary cause of the building collapse?
Not that I could see. You wouldn't say, unlike some one I saw last year where it was a very, very swampy area. Some blamed it on the topography of the region. The building wasn't standing well, or it was an old building, In this case, it was a two-story building that was still under construction. According to the eyewitnesses there, they had gotten to roofing level. The only possible thing I could think of, because we're still waiting for official responses after investigation has taken place, the only thing I could think of, and what the people were saying, like you said, the gist is in the gossip, or the truth is in the gossip, is the use of substandard materials, which most likely would have led to the crumbling of that building. And that's what the people around there, who actually are construction workers, most of them that I met there, that's what they were echoing and re-echoing all the while I was there.
Okay, so I did talk about, the regulatory oversight. In your investigation, did you find any such cases? Like, did anything hint at the fact that there were no proper regulations? You did mention that it seemed like a hideout that was almost impossible to reach. Do you think that that also was a contributory factor?
I mean, it could be. I'm not saying it is, but it could be, because, look, you know the way Lagos is, and then that particular area is a place where you have developing structures. There was one man I met there who said since since that plot of land was sold out to developers, that even they who are indigenous of the area have not gained access into that place because, of course, the developers have bought the area, so it's a private location. You can't just gain access in or out. So if that be the case, whoever needs to come in there will have to gain access through the estate. As a matter of fact, that's why we were told to leave the place, because it's a private place. They kept asking us, how did we gain access, and things like that. So and that's just one of so many. There's so many other estates springing up across Lagos, across Ajah area, developing sites. It may be difficult for the authorities to keep tabs with, but that's their job. They have to do that. So it may be a bit challenging, but again, they just have to do that. Whether they gain access to those places or not, that's not an excuse to let people die. They have to find ways to keep tabs. As long as a plot of land has been sold or people have gotten the certification to commence building, they have to keep tabs with those buildings from the scratch to when it's completed. I'm
glad that you said that, because I was going to ask, this issue of barrier of access, the lack of accessibility, the land or the building owned by some powerhouses. It seems that is one of our major challenges. So I was going to ask that, do you think that this is a conversation that needs to be had? The major challenge we're having is those bottlenecks. I think the earlier we broke those barriers, the better. Like you rightly said, once the land is sold from the onset, in fact, before the selling of the land, while the land is being processed, whoever is buying the land, the government needs to be aware. Definitely. So that they can, because at the end of the day, it's not going to continuously be the property of the developer. At some point, it will change hands to the innocent people who know. And then again, that's a conversation about education that we should have, because most people just want to buy land, own houses. We don't do our due diligence when it comes. But again, it boils down to awareness. How many people are aware of the things they need to know about their lands, of the things they need to know? But so this is a broader conversation beyond substandard material, which of course is one of our major challenges. But again, it boils down to the governments, the individuals, the owners of these lands and buildings. So I'm glad that you answered that. But I also wanted to ask, what challenges did you face while you were trying to get this story out? You said you were asked to leave the estate before having the chance to properly interview the eyewitnesses.
Exactly. So I did mention earlier that, first of all, we didn't get the clear information on time. We didn't get the clear location. So first of all, it was challenging getting to the actual location. We had to get a cab driver who kept on asking questions. In fact, getting into the estate, so we didn't know anybody inside the estate who would have given us access. So the cab driver was smart enough to find his way in because it's a place he's familiar with. And then another challenge we had basically was the fact that the authorities came and told us, look, we don't allow this here, we need to leave. So we couldn't even ask proper questions. If not that, the camera operator was smart enough to get those shots before we started the interview, So he had to really that's why we got those clips. But we would have had better responses from the people. But finally, before we could do the live report, when we stepped out of the estate and we stood by the gate, you still have the issue, and this is a conversation for another day, of, I'll call them agberos, area boys who were there, who literally prevented us from doing our job. I had to part with money so that they could allow me do the live report from outside there. So, and again, that's a conversation for another day. So these were some of the challenges that we actually had. If some of these bottlenecks and challenges that are not addressed, it's going to be difficult for proper journalistic work to be done, particularly across Lagos State.
All right. I would have loved to ask more questions about that because, like I said, a lot of things are baffling to me. But unfortunately, we have to end it here and quickly take our forecast to let you know what to expect in the coming weeks. So we start off with Ethiopia and Eritrea signing historic peace agreement. After decades of conflict, both countries have signed a landmark peace agreement aiming to restore diplomatic relations and promote regional stability. Now, this agreement includes provisions for reopening borders, resuming trade, and facilitating family reunifications.
And from Ethiopia in the east, we go to Nigeria in the west, where in response to rising inflation rates, the Central Bank of Nigeria, that's the CBN, has announced new monetary policies aimed at stabilizing the economy. Now, measures include adjusting interest rates and implementing stricter lending regulations to control money supply and encourage investment. And that's about the place where we would draw the curtains on today's episode of Report Desk Africa. Like you said, Blessings, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to journalism in Nigeria, gaining access to the story so that we can tell true stories. And I truly hope that, things will improve this year.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so. All right. Thank you for joining us to discuss these two pivotal issues. And we hope to see you on our subsequent episodes. This is Report Desk Africa. My name is Blessings Mosugu.
And my name is Bernard Akede. Thank you for joining us. See you same time next week.